Hello, I'm Guillermo Martinez. Today I want to talk about an altar and about feeding your instruments, because even though we think instruments are inanimate, they do have a spirit and a soul, and they need to be fed. And and also, if you have an altar, and every time you go to ceremony and the instruments come back to the altar, they bring that energy of that ceremony to the altar and energize it. But so one of the few things that you should have, or you can have, is crystals is one thing that you could have. I have here a small figure of an idol of from the Yamabushi tradition from Japan, and he is a mountain spirit, or the old man of the mountains, and he was an actual person that renounced civilization and went to live in the mountains and became wild and basically like a Native American. And so the Yamabushi, which is like, I believe it's a Shinto branch of the Japanese tradition. I'm not sure, but I really am fond of them and have been seeing their shrines and so forth. But so I like him. I have him here. I have an antler, a skull from a beautiful deer, which is powerful. I have my fan. I have a shell, or Quetzalcoatl, which is important. So and then also I have something to burn some something, some medicine. So I have copal, I have palo santo, and I have sage here. And also you should have an ancestor plate or an offering plate. And I'm gonna have my daughter bring it over so you can see. It has chocolate, which represents food. There's water, salt, and tobacco. Those are the four things you should have. Food can be anything you had for dinner. In this case, I have chocolate. Chocolate is a very traditional offering. And so there you go. So I'm not going to tell you how to do the ceremony. Basically, it's these are some of the things that you can have, and this is just like a something that all cultures use, and not just the Plains Indians, but also Mexico and anywhere you go. Really, these are some of the common things that you'll find. And regarding feathers, you have to be careful what you have. Here, what I have here is legal for me to have, and be careful with as far as feathers that you acquire. So here's some copal here. You burn some copal, or your incense, whatever you're going to burn, your medicine. And smudging your pieces are important, your instruments. And one thing you do have, say if you have a new drum, you should have your ancestor plate, your shrine or your altar, and you should have tobacco on it. Now if the drum is wet, you don't want to put tobacco directly on the drum, because it'll stain it. Say if you just made a drum, and you're gonna feed it, you can put a small plate next to it and have the tobacco on there. But this drum is dry, and we usually put tobacco in 4 places and in the middle. And that would be a typical offering. You could also put tobacco over your rattles and over your instruments. This case, I have a flute here. And say you're about ready to use it, you can just pick it up and use it, and tobacco goes wherever it needs to go. And you wake it up, and you start to use it. So these are some of the things that, hopefully this will inspire you to create an altar. I think a lot of young people are doing ceremony now. They're acquiring flutes, drums, and rattles. And like I said, I explained in the shrine what they represent. And this is like a really typical setup for an altar. And you can personalize it. You can add photographs. As far as deities, I have a Japanese one here, but you could have a Catholic deity if you want. Whatever is important to you, or a Buddhist or Shinto tradition, or in the Native American tradition, like this rack, this skull of an animal, like a bison skull. Those are typical centerpieces of a shrine or an altar, or a conch shell. The conch shell would be a beautiful centerpiece, and crystals could also be a centerpiece. And I have a seashell here. Make sure you use stones on the bottom so you don't burn the shell. You should have something to buffer the heat. Some sand would be good. If you use a ceramic dish, ceramics work best. Make sure it's low fire so it doesn't crack or explode on you. And so there you go. Hopefully this is useful. And so yeah, take care of your instruments, not only physically, you know, by protecting them from heat and temperature and so forth, and just making sure that their kids aren't hitting each other with them or whatever. You know, make sure they're always respected, and this is just another aspect of their care, is their spiritual care, and cleaning them, taking any negative energy off, and making sure they're used properly. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention about the ancestor plate is the representation. The salt represents, it's a very important trade item. The early part of humanity was extremely important. Imagine eating all of your food without salt. This is like life without anything beautiful. So in the ceremony one time, they served us food. After the ceremony, they served us food with no salt, and they had us try it. And then they said, go ahead and add salt. You know, the salt is like what happened today. It was our dances, our singing, our prayers that were offered that day in that ceremony. That's the salt. That's what it represents. So it could be like the singing that we do in our life, you know, the joy that we have. And so salt is important. Water, of course, water is life. Food is something also we need, and tobacco is something that was given to humans as offerings to give to our ancestors, to the animals and to the plants as we use them and for our sustenance and for our livelihood. So once these things have been on an altar and have been ritually offered, this all goes back to the earth. So you take it out in your garden and just dump everything out, get rid of the salt and so forth, and you know, try to get a nice little plate or something, nice little containers to do all this. So hopefully that'll you know, I think this is important to remember this about the ancestor, the spirit plate. Okay, take care.